Hi, folks.
Hi, Deep. Thank you for joining us.
No problem. I was wondering if you could hear me because...
No, we can hear you. We're going to start.
Thank you so much for coming. This is Urmi here.
Hi, Urmi. Sorry, I couldn't be 5 minutes early. Priyanka knows why, but I made it in time.
No problem. We'll start now. So good afternoon, everyone. I take this opportunity to welcome you to the second season of Future of Work, hosted by the Career Development Office at Ashoka University. The theme of the webinar is Startups and New Age Organizations. It has been almost 2 years since work from home was mandated upon us due to COVID-19. A lot has changed since then, including how a complex economy such as ours responds to the job crisis that followed. By 2022, it is forecasted that almost 37% of the workforce in India would be in jobs that will require radically changed skill sets. As a result, there is a growing acknowledgement of the need to understand two things: which sectors are growing to create jobs at scale, and what new age skills are needed to respond to the challenges of a new way of working. This afternoon, we are delighted and proud to bring together the founders of immensely successful startups, Ashoka alumni in the startup space, and Professor Debayan from Ashoka's Computer Science Department to discuss new trends in the hiring landscape. The event is divided into 4 segments, the first being keynote speech. And it is my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Deep Kalra, founder and executive chairman, Make My Trip, India's leading online travel company. Deep is the co-chair of CII's National Committee on Tourism and Hospitality. He is a founding member of India Tech organization and industry body representing the interests of Indian digital companies. Deep is on the board of TIE NCR chapter and served as president from 2013 to 2016. He is also one of the founding members of Ashoka University and serves on their governing body and board. Deep serves on the board of GMDA, Gurgaon's Metropolitan Development Authority. A believer in citizens' effort, he is a founding member of I Am Gurgaon, an NGO focused on improving quality of life in Gurgaon. Deep has been recognized by Ernst & Young as the Entrepreneur of the Year, Business Transformation 2011, and as the most powerful digital influencer in India 2012 by KPMG. Deep is also passionate about sustainable tourism and has been championing this cause through Make My Trip Foundation. He holds an MBA degree from IIM Ahmedabad and a bachelor's degree in economics from St. Stephen's College, Delhi. Deep's interests also include swimming, yoga, adventure sports, quizzing, and of course, traveling. Without further ado, over to you, Deep, and warm welcome from Ashoka.
Thank you very much, Urmi. That's a lovely, very warm welcome. A little embarrassing, but thanks all the same. It's wonderful to be here with Ashoka, of course, and with the Career Development Office, with whom I share a special bond. So very happy to be here. And thank you, wearing my Ashoka hat, for putting this together. I think it's a highly relevant topic, which we should be discussing. And, you know, as you gave me my charter of what to talk about, one thought couldn't help but come to mind, which was, would we even be having this discussion if there wasn't a pandemic? You know, the future of work in startups is a very relevant point, and we should be talking about it all the time. But it was nothing that was so earth-shakingly different from what was going on around us. Perhaps not. Perhaps we would only have this discussion because what's happened really with the pandemic is the shock value that only a crisis can sometimes give. And that's what we've got, the shock which has come out of the pandemic, which has impacted all aspects. And I do want to take a few minutes to talk about the other aspects before coming squarely to the topic of today, which is the future of work in startups. Well, firstly, the pandemic, while it's obviously been terrible for everyone for 2 years, I can tell you from my point of view and my business, which is travel, it's been absolutely devastating. We have learned to live between waves. The first lockdown completely crushed everyone in travel. And then between the waves, as we know, travel's coming back. I know many of you have been traveling with caution. And again, we're just hopefully getting out of the third wave, the Omicron wave. And again, we're seeing green shoots of travel once again. So it's been a crazy couple of years. But that's only one aspect of the new age economy or the startups. Overall, ironically, the pandemic has actually had many silver linings for the new age economy. It's actually been, weirdly, as we say, and ironically, as we say, it took a pandemic for India's internet moment to come. That's true. And I'll repeat that. India's internet moment, we've been cheering for it from the sidelines. I wear also a tie hat, which is the Indus Entrepreneurs and a few other organizations like India Tech, like you called out, where we're really, really trying to nurture and accelerate this ecosystem. And it's been chugging along well. It's been growing very well. Some of us set up internet companies long back, etc. But what's happened in the last couple of years is unheralded. And you just have to think about the numbers for a couple of minutes to realize just how massive the impact of that has been. Well, firstly, pre-pandemic, almost 2 years to the date, March 2020, many of us won't forget that, there were about 500 to 600 million users on the internet, so internet users, but there were only about 120 million internet buyers in India. So people who actually purchase something. The others were coming for free content, checking news, checking out rates, going offline. But about 100, 120 million, which wasn't bad. But for a country of the size of India, 1.3 billion people, we were always hoping it can be much more. It can be much more like what the Chinese ecosystem was, etc. And then just in these 2 years and a month short of 2 years, that number has more than doubled. We have 250 million buyers already. Some estimates say there are 275 million buyers on the internet in India. That's the size of the entire population of the US, and not all of them buy online, as we know. So it's been mammoth, it's been massive, and for a very simple reason. There were no other choices or viable options in the first lockdown. The first lockdown jolted us. There was nowhere you could go. Remember, it was pretty much curfew all the time. And the only way to get a lot of goods and services that you needed was to order them online. And miraculously, they were getting delivered. The supply chains had been, well-oiled in the past and perhaps ready for something like this. You could order meals, you could order food, groceries, anything you wanted, and they were delivered fairly reliably at home. You could make your payments quite effectively through wallets, etc., etc. And so a lot of the people who were naysayers, a lot of the people who were sitting on the fence saying, I'm not sure if it's safe to buy online. And maybe not most of us who are here in this seminar, most of us are probably in the age group where we're very comfortable with the internet. But just think for a minute about 2 or 3 other constituents. Think about your older generation, think about your parents, uncles and aunts. Many of them were still not sure about this thing called the internet. Think about blue-collar workers around you. Maybe people, staff at home or part-timers or someone else who was coming and helping you. They were not that comfortable on the internet. And now we've realized a lot of that. They were not comfortable buying on the internet, big distinction. So today, the total number of people who are on the internet might have moved from 550, 600 million to about 700 million. That move is not that much, but it is going ahead pretty strongly. However, the number of people buying online has doubled. So that's given rise to an ecosystem of a very different order. And not only are the numbers more, the frequency has gone up. So people are spending a lot more time on the internet. People are spending a lot more money on the internet. They are now turning to it for almost everything. And as I have seen in our own business and Make My Trip, it's a one-way street. Once you go online, you seldom go offline for the same thing because you realize the power of the medium, the simple, the simplicity, the convenience, the effectiveness of the medium. And it's so we've got converts for life. So that's the biggest silver lining to the internet economy. And now we draw the connection from that to the startup economy. At the same point of time, a lot more capital was coming into the system, partially because the internet economy was booming, We saw a couple of blockbuster IPOs in the 2 years that have gone, more than a couple each year, actually, massive IPOs, which meant more money coming into the ecosystem. Also, at the same point of time, a geo kind of political shift that was happening was US and China were falling further apart. And a lot of the money, which typically went from the US, which frankly has most of the pools of capital, the original pools of capital, wasn't going to China now. And again, it was finding a great place and a great home to be in India. So a lot of capital coming in from venture capital, from private equity, all of that really finding India as being, wow, this economy, internet economy is on steroids now. And that's what all the VCs were thinking. And at the same point of time, you had a lot of young startups, young entrepreneurs taking opportunities and saying, hey, I see this new opportunity out here, a secondary or a tertiary opportunity in the ecosystem, which didn't exist maybe 5 years ago or 3 years ago, is there now, and I can build something for it. People were building the spades now for the gold rush. So a lot of interesting things have been happening over the last couple of years in the startup ecosystem. The numbers, again, are staggering. By 2025, I believe 100,000 new startups, 1 lakh new startups will come up, which is quite an amazing number. More than 3 million new jobs in startup economy alone will be created. 3 million jobs. Some estimates are 3.25 million jobs in the startup economy. $150 billion of capital is expected over the next 3 years now to come into this economy, which will give value to 3x or even more than 3x that amount. So $500 billion of value creation, $500 billion of value creation. And don't forget, we're trying to build ourselves into a $5 trillion economy. So a massive part coming out of startup. So startups are here. The future, startups are here for good. The future is super bright for startups. That being said, since we also have a lot of young folks looking maybe to join startups or start startups, I do want to caveat that with a very important point. There are still risks. There will still be failures, perhaps not in the same number as you saw earlier. A very well-kept secret among venture capitalists is that only about 2% of companies that start up actually become successful companies. That's it, just 2. I think that number will go up appreciably, but still many will fail. So go in, please, with your eyes open, not with blinkered vision, not with stars in your eyes when you're joining a startup. Be very aware. It's a different topic and a different discussion, but things are definitely going to be very, very bright for the startup economy. So I just wanted to put that out there first. Next, so what does the startup economy do for the future of work? How does that change? How is the future of work going to actually change in this new world? Well, I think we've learned a couple of things. The first thing we've learned through these 2 years of working is that work from home is indeed viable, is indeed possible, is not some pie in the sky scheme. It works. There are many downsides to it, and we'll come to that in a minute, but the fact is that it works. The office has moved home fairly seamlessly. And thank you for the kind of platform we are on today, whether it's Zoom or many of the other platforms out there. Really, I mean, imagine working from home without these. How would we do all of this kind of stuff? So firstly, it's quite possible, it's viable. We've seen it for 2 years. Secondly, hybrid is a reality. Hybrid work is going to happen, right? We've all seen hybrid in 2 forms. One is, how often will you go to work? Will you go to work all 5 days in the week, in some places 6 days a week, or will you go to work 3 days a week, or 2 days, or 4 days, as the case may be? That's hybrid. The second part is, will everyone come to work? I don't believe so. I think many people have made peace with the fact that they can work from home or from a remote location. Please don't imagine home to be in the same city as your office, where it's quite easy to go to work. What if you stay in a small town? A lot of India comes from smaller towns, but offices in big cities. You've realized I'm quite effective working from there. Your employer doesn't mind. Typically, if you're in the tech space or in the product space, it becomes even easier. And they say, okay, you can come in once in a while. So I think hybrid is a reality. It's going to have to be accepted by employers. Of course, there's a downside, guys. There's no question. The biggest downside about all of this is culture. Culture really suffers, work culture. We have worked now in 3 different waves. The last big stint of work we got was from August to December till Omicron hit. And that was great to be back at work. but not a single day did we hit more than 30%. We didn't really want to go, but not a single day in our Gurgaon office did we hit more than 30% of staff. And in our Bangalore office, we never went beyond single digits, largely techies. They just didn't want to come to work, or they were in the smaller parts of the country. We couldn't really call them back and then say you have to go back. So many complications. So employers will have to accept this. Employees will have to accept this. This is part of it. The gig economy is now for real. Okay, the Great Resignation, if you haven't read that article, it was in the Atlantic. Originally, it's on the web. Please read it. The Great Resignation is for real. People are saying, I can work from anywhere. I can work from the mountains. I can work from the beach. I can be fairly productive. It's real. Multi-jobs, I hate to say, something I learned much to my distress, is a reality. People are doing multiple jobs sitting at home. They're not quitting from your job and they're doing other jobs as well. No way to monitor. So what is the implication? The implication of all of this is that everything is going to be more output focused. Gone are the days where we'll be obsessed about how much are you putting into a job. Task orientation is going to get replaced with really quality of output. So people are going to be seeking, I can tell you from an employer's point of view, we're going to be seeking people who are far more creative, who are far more problem solving. As I always say, please find problems, but bring solutions. So it's okay to find problems, it's great, but then also bring the solution. We're looking to find people who are confident, who can think out of the box. We're looking to find people who are agile to learn, who are hungry to learn, of course, who can learn by osmosis, and now not in the same room, now in the same Zoom room, but you will learn through osmosis. It's a new skill. So you'll have to be more adaptive, you'll have to be more agile. And that's going to be the norm now. So bring that USP that you've got to the table. And it's not about putting in many hours. It's about working smart. It's about the ability to understand what the organization is doing. Your ability as a youngster now to find solutions to problems will be harder. To network will be harder, but you will have to do it. You'll have to build your own networks within the org, and you'll have to understand what are other aspects of the organization doing to take the organization in the direction that it wants to go. So many more challenges on you. But at the same point of time, I also think there are grave and big implications on the employers if they want to succeed in this brave new world. And employers, meaning organizations, meaning leaders, meaning entrepreneurs, and they all have to keep this in mind. Firstly, I think you've got to understand very acutely what the new age or the startup employee wants. The startup employee wants a lot more autonomy. They're willing to give an arm and a leg. They're willing to change the world. They're going to come and do everything for you, especially if they're from Ashoka. I can tell you from past experience. They love to come in. They love to give everything to the organization, but they want autonomy. Flexibility and autonomy will go hand in hand. So you have to embrace that as an employer. You have to now build structures and systems which bring the best out of your people no matter where they are. So very enabling structures, not the kind of structures which were very rigid. Decision-making was on the top. You only turn to your leaders to find the best ideas. No, you have to harness the power of the troops. You have to find the best ideas will actually come from the people who are closest to the customer. Customer centricity becomes even more important. And you should be willing to go out and build those kind of organizations which are diverse, which are inclusive, where you can draw your people in and say, listen, you're in a place which, for lack of a better word, is a really empowered organization, which will bring the best out of you. And we build a great culture, even if we don't see each other 5 days a week, even if we see each other 2 days a week, we'll still build that, because guess what? The organization will now depend on you as an individual to contribute to some of the most important things, which is innovativeness, new ideas, new solutions, and how we can basically make a greater and a better company. So I think it's going to be very exciting. It's going to be very challenging all over again. I think it's a version 2.0 or a 3.0 version for the startup. And I just hope that everyone is ready to embrace it and to take the best of it. So I've seen some questions pop up, and I want to make sure that we can do justice to them as well. Urmi, do you want to call some of them out?
Sure. There are a few questions deep, and we have about 2 minutes, so we will take them. Only once for the bold entrepreneurship is now becoming mainstream. More and more millennials are choosing to build a company instead of taking that first job. So what is the future of entrepreneurship?
Okay, I see it now. Yeah, from Zubin. Yeah. So, I guess I touched upon some of this already. So I think it's fair to say, Zubin, that the new entrepreneur or the future of entrepreneurship, I maintain, is very bright. I think the new entrepreneur has to be far more seasoned, has to be far more. This is not. I saw the first wave, so I said I'd make my trip way back in 2000. It's been 20, 22 years. I've seen a couple of waves and different kind of entrepreneurs. The good news is they're only becoming smarter and better and more seasoned. And like you said, more millennials are choosing a company instead of taking the first job. Yes, that's happening. So for the new entrepreneur, it's very exciting, but you've got to make sure that you are able to harness the skills and the passion that people bring. So the fundamental skills of the entrepreneur don't change. The fundamental skills are what? So what do you want? Why do some entrepreneurs succeed and not? Very simply put, it's a long, elaborate topic. The best entrepreneurs are very ambitious, but also realistic. At the same point of time, the best entrepreneurs are great motivators. They're willing to get the best out of people, irrespective of their levels. The best entrepreneurs cut across channels. They're very easy to work with. They love to work with the young people who are coming in. So all of these traits are very relevant today. So as you say, more and more millennials want to come into the workforce. The best entrepreneurs will actually gain from this net because they will be able to tap the power of the crowd, which is the internal crowd or your internal company and the young startups. Those who will not do that, I think will lose out. Those who are stuck in working with, just a certain set of people, very, very hierarchical structures that are fairly rigid, I think will not be able to tap the power of this.
So coming to the next question, which is it possible to predict the startup success? I think it's a follow-up on what you just mentioned, right?
Say that again.
The next question is it possible to predict startup success?
Okay, it's a great question. It's as difficult as the ability to predict the stock market. If anyone could predict startup success, I think they would be obviously the most successful venture capitalist, maybe the most wealthiest person in the world. So it's very hard. All you can do is put in place your framework. I can tell you, I'm only an angel investor, that too very occasional. So I definitely lay a lot of emphasis on the quality of the team. So the founder and co-founders, for me, that's the make or break. Why? Because the business model can change. If you have a really good team, they will seize new opportunities. They will spot them very quickly. They'll sniff them out and they'll say, hey, listen, let's do this. Actually almost junk what we're doing right now because the world has changed or the new opportunity. But if you don't have a great team, then they're not going to be nimble. They're not going to be able to spot new opportunities. They're going to be stuck or rigid with their old ones. Resilience is a great quality, but not at the cost of being that rigid that you're not willing to look at what the new opportunities are. And secondly, I look at their ability to attract talent. So really, are they good salespeople? I can tell you even today when we're hiring, I'm still selling. I'm happy to do that because I want to get certain people into the company when I'm excited about them and the value that they can add to the company. So I think those qualities are the most important. And then there are many, many more things. Obviously, size of market or TAM, which is the fashionable term, which is total addressable market, your USP, your technology, all of that's super critical. I'm not trying to put any of it down. But there's no short formula right now, just like there's no short cure to COVID.
Sure. So Deep, we have quite a few questions coming in, but unfortunately we are running out of time. So we will not be able to take any more questions. Thank you so much. This was 20 minutes of nugget of a lot of knowledge and a lot of learning for me personally. I did not know that we have now 600 million internet users, and surely it is a one-way street. I don't think I myself am going to go offline because now with the pleasure of, shopping from online, I think that is really comfortable for all of us. Also working from home, as you rightly said, the hybrid culture and the Great Resignation is the book. I think I'll pick that up.
It's an article, The Great Resignation. Yeah, it's really good.
Sure. Multiple jobs coming across. Our students community are excited to work with startup. Ashoka, of course, is training very hard and putting in a lot of effort for problem solving and critical thinking, creative thinking. So I think we are all headed in the right direction. Lots to look forward to from the startup community and for the entire nation. So happy to have you. Great to meet you. Thank you so much for your time. We will move ahead with the next segment. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Urmi. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful session.
Gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. We will now move on to the next segment. How do the liberal arts and sciences help students polish their skills that are required at startup workplaces? How are the departments at Ashoka University adding value in shaping newer coursework? To discuss these and many other initiatives, I now welcome Professor Dehu Gupta from the Computer Science Department of Ashoka University. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. It's my pride and I am honored to have you over here. Professor Dehu Gupta is currently an assistant professor of computer science at Ashoka University. He is also a visiting professor and research affiliate at MIT and MIT Sloan. Before coming to Ashoka, Professor Dehu Gupta held an extraordinary faculty position in Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at MIT. He has a PhD from Yale and a bachelor's degree from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. Dehu, welcome.
Hi, pleasure. Thank you for that very kind introduction.
Without getting into any further ado, let's just start and dive right into the conversation. New age organizations, as we see, from the careers office, they are here to offer new age roles. Lines, Dehu, are blurring. Organizations are now looking at, talent that just maybe not know only computer science, but maybe a student who knows computer science and, for instance, maybe philosophy. Keeping in mind the trend, my question to you is, how is Ashoka University changing its course curriculum and how is it equipping the students to address the new trend?
You got right into it. I think I have two different answers to that, right? One is, there's a certain amount of balance to be achieved between flexibility, that is, as the world changes, the ability to reskill and learn new things and so on and so forth, and having very strong foundations, right? You can't do CS plus X unless you have your CS first, because I teach computer science. That's the lens through which I'm approaching this. So the way Ashoka does this is pretty simple. We have a set of foundation courses, literally to set up those foundations. And then beyond that, what we have is a very, very interesting, and yeah, I'm harping on about myself, that interesting mix of courses, right? There are many places which will just do, okay, here's a programming course, we'll teach you C or Python. Here's a course on databases, and you learn that same old SQL stuff. That, I think, is very, very dangerous and stupid in today's world, right? One of the things that I mentioned to my students is that think about what skills people were learning in the year 2000. If you were in college 20, 25 years ago, what would you have learned? And would you have completely forgotten all of that by now, right? What I want to instill in each of my students is a set of abilities that's going to serve them well throughout their lifetime. Now, all of us here have access to the internet. We can learn pretty much whatever we want, right? So if you wanted to learn Python, a programming language, you could go online, the resources are there, but most of us don't. Most of us use the internet to watch cat videos or whatever, right? So as a professor, I cannot be a conveyor belt of information. I'm not just, okay, learn ABCD, you've learned your syllabus, you can check your, tick your check boxes, and that's that. Instead, it's become a story of inspiring students to explore further, to say that, hey, look, here's an interesting problem. How do you think about it? How do you attack it properly? And simultaneously, it's not just random exploration of problems, but then teaching the students how to go about approaching a new, perhaps ill-posed, or as they're called, wicked problems, right? And those are skills we spend a lot of time building. So if I'm teaching algorithms, I'm not just saying, here's an algorithm, learn it, you're done. What I'm doing instead is bringing in real world scenarios, real problems with fuzzy descriptions, and then looking at the toolbox of things that are available, and then working with my students to come up with solutions. And some of them may be worse than the official solution, but they'll learn those by themselves. And that process is really, really critical. In terms of curriculum specific things, I can tell you about one of the courses I'm teaching right now. It's called New Geography of the Information Age, and it's probably my most popular course, and which is surprising to me because it's really hard. It's a lot of work. And there, one of the main things we do is look at how technology is interacting with society at scale, right? And that sort of thought process requires you to think about anthropology. It requires you to think about political science. It requires computer science. These are all difficult things to think about together. We're used to thinking in siloed ways. And nature doesn't care if we humans decide this is physics and that is chemistry. Nature is nature. Reality is reality. So that unsiloing thing is really, really cool. And if we have more time to talk about it later, I can tell you more about the New Geography course as well.
Right. So since the students are getting into these new courses, I am thinking that our students fit in well for both tech and non-tech roles.
This is true, because again, this division between tech and non-tech, right? I think that's a false dichotomy, right? Even in India, when someone says liberal arts college, people assume, oh, social sciences, something, something, something. That's not true. The liberalis ars, that it comes from arts of the free person. You can go back to ancient Roman times or whatever. You had citizens and non-citizens, and citizens could go for the liberal arts, the arts that a free person could study. When you were not constrained by requirement, you could learn mathematics and logic and grammar and astronomy and so on and so forth. That's what we're after. Because if you're trying to predict the future, that's super hard. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to predict the future. How can I prepare my students for tomorrow if I don't even know, what are the top 10 highest paying jobs today? Many of them, it's a trope. They didn't even exist 20 years ago. So the people graduating 15, 20 years ago, how can their teachers and professors be expected to train them if those jobs, if those industries in many cases had not been properly envisioned yet? And this stuff is only going to get faster. I'm training students who are in their early 20s. And I'm thinking, wait, when they hit their 40s, I don't know what the world is going to look like. And anyone who says they do know is lying to you, right? So in that sense, there's a lot of effort spent in building up the ability to reskill, the ability to look at problems from a fundamental level instead of just learning solutions. In fact, for that very reason, I'm kind of infamous for doing this. All my exams are open book. I don't do closed book exams at all. I'm like, open internet, you can access whatever you want, right? The only thing I ban is communication between students themselves. So it can't be you do question 1, I'll do question 2 or something. And that's because we need to stop thinking of the learning system as something that exists in isolation. If I'm preparing someone for the real world, why should I say they can't access the internet? If they're solving a problem in the real world, of course they're going to Google it. And first, if they find the solution, they should use that solution. They should use all of these technologies to augment their minds. Right. And that ability to quickly learn, to quickly take solutions provided by others and fit it into current problems and rethink the way they're looking at a current problem quickly, that's something that's really, really, really important.
Right. And so we just heard Deep speak, and you're talking about the real world. There is a lot that's happening in the startup ecospace. And I see in Ashoka, there's a lot of emphasis on computer science plus entrepreneurship. What are your thoughts? What is the special intersection, the interesting intersection between computer science and entrepreneurship, particularly?
So look, computer science is lucky. We're a new subject, right? I like to joke about how computer science isn't a science and it has very little to do with computers. We have a lot of very, very talented students who are very creative, and we end up doing a lot of new things with them, right? I think the best way to really teach is by doing cutting edge research. I don't think those are two, oh, you need to put time into research or into teaching or something of that sort. So we spend a lot of time with students actually doing new things. Hey, DeepMind came up with a new thing 2 weeks ago. Let's study that. Let's see if we can make it better. And it comes with a certain amount of arrogance, by the way, thinking that, oh, all these clever people with degrees from blah, 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 they're all doing this stuff, and we're random undergrads, and we're going to try and make it better. And I think that that ambition is something we're building, that confidence. And I mean, think about it this way. By definition, if your ambitions are large enough, by definition, you're underqualified, right? And we're spending a lot of time building up that ability. And when you're talking about doing new things, the moment, I mean, I hardly have to do anything. I'm an intellectual arsonist. I sort of light the fire and get out of the way. With most of my students, I tell them that, hey, take these techniques that I taught you, look at ABCD areas. They'll be like, oh, I like C. Okay, here's a project, figure it out. And boom, 2 weeks later, somebody's done something interesting. I mean, a fair number of the undergraduates who work with me have a number of international, like proper quality publications. Okay, I'm being kind of weird, like not random predatory journal places. I'm talking about very high quality publications and top 10 conferences and journals and so on. And they certainly have more than I did. And this is happening because they're willing to do new things. They're willing to say that, hey, I'm going to put aside an extra 10, 15 hours every single week to work on this problem because I like it. It's new. Nobody's doing what I'm doing right now. And that energy, I think, translates quite seamlessly into the space that is entrepreneurship. Right? So I think that's where a lot of this synergy is coming from.
Right. Devan, we have many questions for you. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. Our next panelists are already joining us. But before we go, quickly, if you could tell us, how is Ashoka enabling the quality of long-term high-level research? I know Ashoka is doing a lot of work in that space. So quickly, if you could wrap up by just talking through the research that Ashoka is undertaking.
Sure. I'll just mention two things, one structural and one kind of direct about the research I'm doing, right? Structurally, one of the things we're doing, we're moving ahead with this. This is no longer a secret. We're starting to, we're envisioning a school of advanced computing. We're taking the computer science department, turning it into a school, and we're going to have certain thematic areas, healthcare, digitization in society, and data analytics. And we're building out our department and now going to be school along these themes where we're going to be getting in super high quality sort of superstars from around the world to collaborate with us and build out these research directions. In terms of direct research that we're doing right now, I'm going to select a few things that really underscore the kinds of interdisciplinary stuff that we're doing, right? I'll give you 3 quick examples, one from biology, one from epidemiology, because everyone knows about COVID right now, and another one from pure CS. One, we're doing some amazing work building single molecule labs, right? This is with Shubhashish Haldar, another professor at Ashoka. And this stuff exists in 3 places. There's a lab in Columbia University, it's a Max Planck, and the third one's at Ashoka. That's it. And we have designed engineered technologies where we're actually taking single molecules of proteins and manipulating them in different ways. Think very, very, very tiny beams of magnetic energy sort of holding things up and twisting them around to experiment with. This kind of tech requires a lot of different kinds of background. And we're able to do it because our students are willing to work across silos. In epidemiology, we're building one of the best simulation systems, agent-based modeling systems, along with Gautam Menon, which is called Bharat Sim, and you'll see this in news pretty soon, where if you've played a strategy game, things moving around on a map, we are literally simulating India. 1.3 billion agents moving around. We have a baby supercomputer, we're simulating the whole darn thing. And there again, you need anthropological expertise. How do people contact each other? You need scaled computer science, because how do you build this out? You need the biologist, you need the epidemiologist, you need to simulate. And all of that is getting in on these efforts. And third, my own personal area of expertise is cryptography. And we're doing amazingly cool stuff there, right? We just had a very nice paper on Aadhaar just a couple of weeks ago, where we actually went in and went through the entire Aadhaar infrastructure. And again, while we analyzed it from the lens of security and cryptography, a lot of our work was also talking to ground level people who had trouble with Aadhaar or who were able to get something good with Aadhaar. And that connectivity, that sort of usability side of things is something I couldn't really have done anywhere else except Ashoka in India. And that's something that I'm really excited about going forward.
Really interesting stuff, and I didn't know that this much of research work is going on within the university. And because you do this kind of research work, what kind of jobs or internship opportunities do you see emerging out of the kind of research that you're doing within the campus?
So I can tell you, now I don't, obviously you at the CDO will know more about overall job stuff. I can tell you what the students I directly work with, what they've ended up doing, right? Because, I end up writing letters of recommendation or whatnot. And I've just been here a couple of years. So over the last couple of years, a very large majority of the students that I work with on my research projects have gone into higher studies. And these are primarily the usual sort of Ivies, Oxford, Cambridge stuff, various universities in Europe. A very large fraction actually is sort of in the Ivy Plus group in the US. Your usual Stanford, Brown, Duke, Johns Hopkins, those sorts of places. And these are all people doing mostly PhD degrees, a few master's degrees, that sort of thing. Industry-wise, we have a very good relationship with Microsoft Research. A fair number of students sort of after finishing up their degrees go to work at MSR. We have a number of people at Google as well. It's pretty standard stuff, the usual Google, Microsoft, Facebook, that sort of thing. We actually have the Cypher Lab, which I run at Ashoka. We collaborate with NASSCOM, specifically the Data Security Council of India that works with them. And we work with a lot of these companies as well, especially Facebook, in sort of designing new technologies for India to abide by regulations and create a sort of more nuanced view of how security and cryptography should work. So a lot of this stuff is happening now at Ashoka. And as a few more years go by, you'll see more of this coming into the public space.
Right. And as we moved into Zoom classes and into this new pandemic kind of a new work culture, was it difficult for you to manage, or how was it?
I'll be honest, it was very difficult for me for two reasons. Okay. I walk when I teach. Anyone who's physically been in my classes just said this is, I did not realize how much of an impact it would have on me, because I'm very hands-on. I walk around, I talk to students, I tell them to come up, I draw on the board. There's a lot of movement involved in the way I usually communicate. And literally just sitting still and trying to talk drove me mad. And I bet there's a fair subpart of our population that's like me. So I think personally that is the biggest problem that I had. But more professionally, I think the ability to read the body language of my students was something I kind of depended on without really thinking about it. And that's something I really miss. Because now it's harder for me to underweight. Are they really getting it? Or are they just saying they're getting it? Because when I'm teaching, teaching is an act of managing the ego of the student, balancing the ego and ability in some sense. Because if I teach something that's too easy, people are going to zone out, and then they're going to zone back in and not know what's going on. If I teach something that's too hard, it'll go over their heads, but they're afraid, wait, if I ask questions, I'll seem stupid. So then I won't ask questions. So I have to keep it at just the right level and maintain the right level of friendliness so that it's sort of just outside their reach, but with just sort of at the edge of their fingertips, that sort of thing. Plus maintain a certain amount of friendliness so they can actually ask questions. And that edge is really hard to maintain if I'm teaching online. But I'm sure it's a skill. I think I think it was the CEO of Coursera or someone. He was talking about how teaching online versus teaching in real life, in physically, these are two completely different skills. It's like theater versus movie. You can't take a video camera into a theater, record it, and say it's a movie. I think, as for me, I had to go through a lot of learning to get used to this new skill set.
Sure. Thank you so much, Devayan. That's all we have right now. But it's extremely heartwarming to know the kind of work your department is taking up and the startup ecospace that's coming up in a big way, creating so many jobs for the students. I think the kind of work you are doing and the focus on interdisciplinary education that Ashoka is very proud of is here to stay, and it's going to take our students a long way. So thank you. We have lots of panelists joining us now, and we'll move on to the next segment. Thank you, and your thoughts and your inputs truly valuable to the student community and also to the recruiters. Thank you. We now move on to the next segment, a segment that we have been waiting for. We welcome our esteemed panelists for our segment. We're absolutely delighted to have amongst us top 4 leaders who are brains behind India's top businesses. Please, for this session, we have guests that are fierce learners. Together, they shall add immense value to the next conversation. The conversation will be moderated by CEO and co-founder of Mosaic Wellness, Revant Bhate. Mosaic Wellness is a platform of personalized digital health clinics started in early 2020 and has seen the backing of marquee investors like Sequoia Capital, Elevation Capital, Elevation Capital and Matrix Partners. Before starting Mosaic, Revant was a venture capitalist and partner at K-Start, Kalari Capital Seed Program, where he invested in multiple B2C businesses. Revant has had a long operating experience with India's largest food delivery business, namely Rebel Foods, as an entrepreneur in residence over a period of 5 years. Before Rebel Foods, he spent 5 years in banking and financial services for the consumer and healthcare sectors. Over to you, Revant, and you will be introducing the panelists now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Urmi. Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite. Quickly, because we only have an hour, I'll get into our esteemed panel that we have today. In alphabetical order, it's my pleasure to welcome Amod, who's the co-founder of Udaan, India's largest and fastest growing B2B e-commerce platform. Welcome, Amod. I think it's very interesting to see that when I was looking at different bios, I really loved your bio where you've, or your team has put together a very, very interesting aspect where you sort of feel that you surprised yourself and your family by escaping to IIT JEE, at least. But I love the thought where you said that you also defied your professor's expectations by completing your BTech from IIT Kharagpur in just 4 years. I'm sure a lot of other students of Ashoka are in the same boat today. Amod has spent a lot of his professional life tinkering with technology and and disappointing his father as well. Again, something that I'm sure a lot of students of Ashoka would feel like today. He loves all things technology, is a very, very below average gamer. So maybe you should get on a game with the students after this as well. Hates losing and really religious building new things. Thanks a lot for such an interesting bio, Amod, and welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Revan.
My pleasure to also invite Sairi Chahal, who's a social entrepreneur, mom, angel investor, evangelist for women in internet. I think Sairi is a well-known face in the startup ecosystem, currently running Shiro's, an online ecosystem for women, offering support, entrepreneurial and employment opportunities on Shiros.com as well as the Shiros app, and Mahila Money, a community neobank for women. Sairi has actually served on the board of Milan Foundation, Paytm Payments Bank, and US-based Women in Cloud. She's an MPhil from JNU, an MBA from IMT Ghaziabad, and is credited with building an ecosystem to support women in their journeys as entrepreneurs and leaders. It's fabulous to have you here, Sairi. I've heard great things about you, and now a pleasure to meet you in person, finally.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sashank, who's also the co-founder and CEO of Dehu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Sashank. Is that the right way?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Dehu is an organization that has helped digitize almost 1 million farmers in India by bringing efficiency and transparency for the supply chain between different businesses. Dehu aims to bring 30 million of Indian farmers together on one platform for various agri-businesses, something that I think is very, very innovative and much needed for a country like India. Prior to Dehu, Sashank actually worked as a consultant in the supply chain industry after graduating from IIT Delhi in 2008. What all of you would also love is that he's an Ashoka Fellow who's been awarded as a distinguished alumni of IIT Delhi for significant contribution to national development. Very, very commendable thing that you are doing, Sashank. And I wish there were more startups doing real son of the soil work. I think some of us do end up doing a few sexy things, but really appreciate what you're doing for the country.
Thanks, Revan. Thanks for having me.
And finally, we have Omang Bedi, who's the co-founder of Words Innovation, which is a content technology platform focused on local languages. Their algorithms power Daily Hunt, India's largest content and news discovery platform, which is across 15 languages, and also Josh, which is India's leading short video app. Omang has been an entrepreneurial business leader all his life. Before being the co-founder at Words, he was serving as managing director of Facebook India, Adobe, and Intuit, and building and growing digital businesses for the last decade and a half. Omang is also an alumnus of the Harvard Business School and an engineering graduate from Pune. Pleasure to have you, Omang, on the panel as well.
Thanks a lot, Revan. Pleasure to be here.
I'm sorry I cut out all the 40 under 40s awards from all your bios because I was feeling a little jealous of not having won that award. So I was.
Please don't.
So let's dive right into this. I think it's been a crazy couple of years. All of us seem to have started, different kind of businesses, and we've gone through a lot of ups and downs in the last couple of years. And as we look to enter, or at least as we have started 2022, it's been a little surprising as it's more of a down than up with the third wave. But I think finally all of us seem to have understood a little bit about how to manage the situation and how do we sort of start planning forward. And what's interesting is that most students want to understand that how's life going to change now as well, right? So I'll dive right into a lot of questions. First one for you, Amod, is, for an organization that has almost 30,000 folks on the ground, how have you actually managed remote/hybrid working over the last couple of years, and how do you see 2022 panning out for you?
So I think we had a bit of an advantage, Revant, that we, for a large part of our knowledge workforce, we had been developing practices around remote working, for a fair bit before COVID hit. Whereas the on-ground operations obviously, is different from that knowledge workforce, but I think that certainly benefited us. So when the lockdowns happened, we were able to adapt far more quickly. I think one area which took some time was around the the on-ground supply chain related issues, which got sorted out in about a couple of weeks, if I remember. But beyond that, I think it's been quite surprising at which our teams, our leaders adapted to the new environment. And I think it's not just limited to us, to be very honest. I think the whole industry adapted very fast in terms of changing the practices, changing the communication models that suit the remote working far more effectively. There've been ups and downs around how to manage the mental well-being of employees, how to onboard new employees, how to maintain culture. There's lots of different dimensions to that question, which I won't be able to respond with a one-line or two, but I'm hoping in this discussion we'll be able to talk a few things about those.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. One of the most interesting things I have seen in the last 15 years of work is how much has changed in terms of expectation from employees and careers as such. So I would want to take this opportunity, Omang, to ask you, because you've been a business leader for as long as I've been working, right? So in terms of, this transition over the last couple of years that has accelerated a lot of things, do you see us moving away from traditional roles like we used to define them as sales, marketing, finance, and chief of staff has suddenly become in vogue over the last 3-4 years. So I keep seeing a lot of new roles coming in. Do you see an acceleration happening there? And how do students today look at understanding some of these and evolving their curriculum as well?
Thanks, Ravant. I think what we are seeing, I'll just take this as an example. So we were a tech platform company, about 400 people in the company before the lockdown, right? We're 1,800 people since the last 13 months. And the way things have transformed for us is fundamentally we were a tech platform company. The company is predominantly product managers, engineers, data scientists, right? I think now with what we are doing around creative expression and with Josh that you mentioned, we have a plethora of new roles. In fact, I don't recognize half the people that have come in. So we have musicians, we have sound artists, we have people who've learned filmmaking from some of the best schools globally, or sound engineers, or cinematographers, or doodlers, and different kinds of young creative skills that have come in. With the amount of data that this has brought in terms of human interaction into apps, the need for data scientists or data analysts or anything to do with data, right? Anything to do with data science has exploded. And it's all a supply and demand equation. Today, I think that's one of the hottest roles, etc. that, if there are 100 jobs in market, there are 6 people that are available, right? So what has happened is, I don't know if some of these support functions I don't think you can have legal evaporate or finance go away or people functions go away. But I think the job that they do is transforming. The output that leaders expect from them is transforming. They can't be support functions. They have to be true business enablers. And they have to really understand the business at depth, right? So I think that's one thing that's changing. The second thing that's changing is evolution of more types of jobs, which are more mainstream. And I'm seeing, at least in the career or the industry that we work in, which intercepts between media and tech, there's a whole emergence of creative skills that are actually needed as well, right? Which was, you never went out into market, said, I'm going to do arts, right, after 12th standard.
Yeah.
But the people who took those career choices and have done well and are either from good schools or great experience are finding themselves in a position where there's lots of opportunity. So I think, to summarize my point, jobs are transforming. The nature of deliverables are transforming. Even if you look at my daughter, who's in class 4 or 5 right now, her whole life is now learning on this computer. and all her assignments are on the computer. So she doesn't care about the spelling that you and I mugged our way through because they're spell checker, right? And so you suddenly realize that the skills that are needed are very different. It's about creative expression. It's about how you communicate in this digital world. How do you collaborate in this digital world? The one thing that often worries me, especially in high growth companies, which are represented on this panel, and I'd love to get everyone's opinion on it as well, is, you can argue work from home and hybrid is the new norm, which it is. But if you're a fast growing company where you're adding people, how do you transform or how do you inculcate the culture of who you stand for, right? Because, we tend to get lost in valuations, and, a lot of companies on the panel have grown valuations significantly. Growth can be as high as 5 to 10x in a year or 18 months. And that's not culturally the values that the founders really started off with, or the passion by which they came in with. So, when your team's smaller and you're in the office, it's easier. It's harder when you have 2/3 of the organization being under 1 year old and you're trying to imbibe culture, right? So I think, to me, that is the central most thing to solve for or to grow on. And I don't think anyone has the right answer. All of us have used different methods, right? Because you get the right people and you can imbibe that culture, then you have magic happen, right? But it's a journey. It's not overnight. And being remote does have its advantages, but this one clearly is harder to feel connected to the spirit of the organization. So I'll just add that from my end.
Right. No, I think that's a very pertinent point. In fact, I was having a call with one of my board members today just on this aspect itself, right? I mean, we are getting to about 24 months and we've been having far more discussions on culture than before. And then I think we'll sort of try to touch upon that a little bit ahead in the panel as well. Though while you were talking, I was constantly thinking how many emails are going to Urmi in the career development office right now saying seed doodling is a possible role. Please get us companies that have that sort of options as well. So Urmi, tough job for you in the coming placement season. But I think thanks a lot for that perspective. And I think just continuing a little on that, Sairi, if you think about 10 years back, 15 years back, I think the evaluation methodologies, which were a lot more on academic strengths, analytical strengths, hard skills, have sort of given a way to a little bit of softer skills that the org's looking for. I think touching upon what Omang mentioned on culture, one aspect is, it's up to us founders to build the culture of the organization. But I really like what Omang said, that how do you get the right folks in that can actually help form the culture as well? Because one of the points, like today morning, when I was talking to my board member, one of the advices that I got was you have to identify who are the ones who are taking the org ahead in the right manner. And you need to keep building your culture book, learning from them. Because there is one school of thought that the culture comes top down. Yes, we can enforce it top down through how we behave and what we reward. But identification of that is through the right kind of people who are exhibiting the right behavior as well. So how do you see a lot of this imbibed within the softer aspects of what we need to look for in people today?
So it's interesting in terms of how our journey has been. So we are a community-first organization. Our product is the community. So we've always felt that for somebody to serve the community, they have to feel like they are in one. So I think for us, I think community as an organization is a fundamental thesis around which a lot of what we do. It allows us two things. One, it does a natural filtration. For example, we're a very mission-driven organization. We don't hire what we call from the market, like we don't give away bikes and stuff, but we also sort of, I think we want people who really care about what we're doing, and I think all organizations want that, the core mission, the core big picture needs to be at the heart of every person. And that's the heart of culture, that everyone cares for the same things and therefore they do everything aligned to the big picture. So for us, that was important. And I think what that led to is actually us bringing in a lot of folks who you can call misfits. I think today it's all right, but 6-7 years ago, a lot of these folks were either women on a break. A lot of these folks were in remote areas, they were in villages, they were army wives, or they were techies who didn't want to work in a large commercial organization. So they were mission centric. They associated themselves with the direction of the organization. So they wanted to become part of it. So for us, that's been one mode. But we're not alone in doing this, right? I think companies like WordPress or GitLab, they've always done this, right? Organizations built as communities. Reddit is a classic example. Your product and your organization need to be familiar, right? And I think in some ways, I do feel organizations are like relationships. Earlier, they were very singular and they were very one track, but I think this is becoming more and more plural, more and more diverse, and we're going to see a lot of organizations build their own tracks. And I think who you attract will become a function of what kind of organization you are. And the other is, of course, entrepreneurial organization. I think now everybody's hiring failed founders and entrepreneurial folks and giving young folks an EIR sort of an opportunity. But I think that's another curve for most learning organizations. Any organization that's growing wants two things in a person, right? They want range and depth, and they want the ability to connect the dots. The big picture needs to connect to the small item at hand. And entrepreneurs do that very well. And I think it's becoming, we've done that a lot historically. For a company that's been around, we've made about 7 acquisitions, all for the founders. So I think bringing a lot more entrepreneurial talent into the company was one way to do this. How do you build more range and depth for people without having a lot of hierarchical structures in place? And third is, I think, just building a lot more tribal knowledge, which is harder. It's easier said than done, because most people still don't write enough. They don't sort of document enough. The organizations still don't have a lot of tooling that enables a lot of this. Assume that there is no offline world, then how do you sort of become a connected organization? You're never going to meet a person or even talk to them. Actually, if you the check to run on this is that assume you're never going to be on a call with this person and you still have to get this job done. Then how do you go about it? So I think these are some sort of broad sort of dots around which we've navigated, and so our org looks a lot like our community actually.
No, that's very, very insightful, Saidi. Thanks a lot for sharing that. There are a few questions coming in already, and I'll sort of pick them up one by one, but would love to sort of extend a little bit on what Saidi said on having a core purpose and mission around which sort of either get more folks in, or potential employees should look at an organization and really understand the purpose and the mission statement. And Shashank, you have a fabulous mission statement of digitizing farmers in India. Would love to understand, does that help you really get a lot of purpose-driven individuals who want to specifically work on this space? Or is it something that you need to inculcate into the culture of the organization and sort of inculcate into the employees as well? And how do you sort of think about continuously building on that? In fact, I'm hearing of a few orgs sort of putting in a chief purpose officer as a new title, who's constantly reiterating that why do we exist, right? Because in the mix of, all of us have suffered enough ups and downs in terms of trying to just keep the org steady in one direction. And one of the core aspects that sometimes gets lost is the core purpose. So would love to get your thoughts on how do you look at attracting talent in the right way with this at its core?
So, very relevant question and very helpful in our last 9.5 years of entrepreneurial journey. And this one thing which is being very vocal with your purpose to attract talent, it always helped us. whether we were at a completely bootstrapped stage or to well-capitalized stage. And I think, again, as an entrepreneur, this is something we learned during very early stage of our journey, that you should always be in hiring mode. But the challenge was, again, I mean, when you don't have resources, then how is that possible? But then the purpose is the right resource for you. And again, I mean, and we never felt shy to talk about that, what exactly we are trying to build. Firstly, this was not just important to get the talent, but it was also important to, again, build your own conviction, right? Because I'm sure most of the startups, again, when you talk to any prospective individual, it's not just one way of communication, right? I mean, it's a bilateral, right? I mean, you also need to tell them that that what exactly you are trying to do, and why exactly you are here. So this is something, and again, this was more needed in our case, where at Dehat, again, we are talking about building a full stack platform for farmers, that whichever crop they are growing, wherever they are across India, regardless of their behavioral aspect, their cultural aspect, or their land holding, how they can get everything related to agriculture under one roof. And with all due respect, this is something like nobody has done this ever, right? So I mean, people, either they had been working either on the input side of the world or output side, or maybe storage or financial services, but nobody has ever kind of again built this a full stack model. So obviously, I mean, it always has been a challenge to convince people that that this is possible. And the flip side is that that once this part is done, then your job is done too, right? Then you don't really need to work with the individual, that what you have to do on day-to-day basis, or how you have to face your again challenges, what you're going to handle on day-to-day basis, right? So once purpose is very clear, then rest everything becomes very easy. Again, in context of Dehat, we don't believe in having a dedicated officer as a chief purpose officer, because we believe that everyone is driving this on day-to-day basis, and it becomes a very again something as a default setting across organization. But yeah, again, to get the talent, and again, in today's world especially, I know like everyone, when talent acquisition has one of the common challenge for everyone, I think this is one thing which is really unique, where not just salary or ESOP, but I think the cause or the purpose is something where you can differentiate yourself, and it helps you.
Got it. No, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. In fact, sorry, you had something to share?
No, go on. Okay,
cool. I've been sort of wanting to get into that segment, because I'm sure all of us are facing it, and you've sort of given me a segue into how tough hiring is actually today. So Omang, would love to get your thoughts on. It was never as hard hiring than it has been in the last 6 months, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all of us are trying to now look at employer branding and wooing the right talent into our organizations as such. How do you see this evolve? Do you see this as a fundamental change? You could say that a lot of larger corporates have always done this, but I don't think it's been at this velocity as much. I mean, the change is just frightening to see, right? And sometimes I feel that I have some gray hair sometime before I become a dinosaur, but it's been interesting to see how much we depend on the right talent as an organization, and how critical it is to get the right folks on board. And I think the need to get, now that we are competing on a global scale, it's not just folks working in Bangalore or Bombay. Suddenly we are competing with those in Germany, those folks who want the best talent in the US. What's your experience been, and how do you see this evolve in the coming year?
So very pertinent question. There are a lot of different views about it. I'm going to just be direct about mine. I think the competition for talent has always been there, and in different forms. And I don't see the current situation as particularly different from how it has been at different points in time. Again, some ups and downs keep on happening around it. But it's not the first time that things have gotten this heated. What we need to bear in mind in scenarios like this, Revant, is attacking the hiring problem as distinct from the retention problem. I've mentioned this before publicly, that I think people may join a company for things like salary and things that are a lot more, direct and concrete. But people choose to stay or leave for a lot deeper reasons than just that. Okay, so which means that organizations that tend to have highly purposeful sort of culture within them, where people are able to relate to that mission very deeply, and they feel that they have a very meaningful role to play in that mission, I think people won't jump ships as easily. Okay, and just like in customers, acquisition costs, you tend to offset that out against your LTVs. You've got to think not too differently about employees, that you've got to give a lot more meaning to their role, particularly in today's environment, because I think more and more industries are looking for highly skilled, knowledgeable folks. Options are way too many, right? So one of the best ways to really make a person stick is to give meaning to their work. And I'm using that word very carefully, very thoughtfully, not in a very casual throw around sort of a way. When it comes to hiring, I think trust and transparency go a very long way, right? You've got to be able to put your neck out on issues that matter. I think people tend to develop an opinion of a certain picture of a company even before they start talking to you, right? To what degree you are able to shape that picture is important, but they shape that picture in a very honest and transparent fashion. Now, employer branding is a word that gets thrown around quite a bit, even by well-meaning people. I think it's very important to be authentic. The more you're authentic, you would attract the kind of people who would want to work with you. So a founder who's particularly aggressive and vocal, it's not like that person can't hire. That person will attract a certain kind of people, right? Same as a founder who's shy but thinks through in a different way and puts out his or her thoughts in a certain refined fashion or something like that, will attract a different kind of people who would want to work with such a founder. It's very important for us to be able to put ourselves out there in a way that is authentic, because the moment we put ourselves out publicly, we can't be changing who we are on on a frequent basis. So I think those are the few thoughts that I wanted to share.
Sure. But I'm sure now we have confused some of the participants who are wondering, should I look to join a Shark Tank founder or a Tweetstorm happy founder, or maybe a founder who's not in the public eye itself, right? So hard problem for the students of today to evaluate that as well. It's interesting. There's actually a couple of questions that I wanted to maybe request you, Omang, to help the students with this. I think the specific questions are around, because you mentioned a lot of different kind of roles evolving. The questions that are coming in are more around, how do we identify skill sets for some of the new age roles, and considering the workspaces are also evolving. And it's difficult for students, and Ashoka offers a plethora of great courses as well as interesting streams, but it's tough for students to sign up on a lot of them on full time. So how should they look at what are the kind of, let's say, soft skills gaps that they need to identify for the next few years and maybe take up some of those courses? And a related question is, which is obviously, I think, I'm sure Amod ke dimag mein bhi tha jab wo IIT mein the and his father was getting disappointed with his grades, is how much are we looking at grades nowadays? Are we still looking at grades?
Maybe I'll start with the second one first. When we hire, we don't look at grades personally. I tend to and even the team around me, we don't really look for book smarts, if I put it that way. We look for people who have actually rolled up their sleeves and have a perspective and a point of view. I think, to Amod's point, the culture, the values, and the authenticity of who you are as an organization and the problem that you're trying to solve, right, needs to be big, large, and inspiring enough for people to come and work with you. For us, it's always been that, we're democratizing the space of local languages and solving a massive big data problem when we're talking about hiring engineers and retaining engineers, that they feel very connected to the culture, because to the size of data and to the size of traffic that we serve, if a young engineer were to join, let's say Facebook or Google or Amazon, it would take 3 years before a single line of his or her code went into production. Whereas here you're working on these massive systems and clusters and traffic zones and trying to serve audiences on different bandwidths, on different networks, and different handsets. I think the problem statement of what you're trying to solve and your mission and your authenticity around solving for that mission truly is extremely important. I would just second that to what Amod said, right, a little while ago. In terms of what my guidance would be to students is, you got to do something that you're passionate about. It starts with what inspires you. If you want to be a great data scientist, then go out there and acquire the skills that are needed for being a great data scientist. If you want to be the best sound engineer in the world, you really want to go and study music with passion, right? So it all begins with, I don't have a title. One very conscious decision that I made after quitting the corporate world is not having a title. I hate titles. I think chief purpose officer is so lame. I kind of agree with, I'm going to shake things up a little here. We've all been very nice, right?
Yeah.
But it's such a lame title. Somebody says chief wizard, somebody says chief. Our job is to serve people. Our people are, we don't own the content creators. We don't have stores. We don't have physical goods that we're selling. Actually, what do we own? We own nothing. We just own the time span and the attention of our users. And we hope that they come back every day, right? And that's delivered by our IP, and our IP is our people, right? And so if you look at it from that lens, you don't want people coming in who are inspired by, I'm going to climb 9 roles, manager, senior manager, blah, blah, blah. That's dead. Those things are gone. Today, the guy who leads our camera tech is a 26-year-old. He could be a model. He could be a fashion model. He's a very good-looking young kid who uses the camera like a creator, right? And he's, I'm just giving that as an example. He's just passionate about content creation. Somebody who leads something else could be very young. So I think age is a number. Titles are, throw them into the dustbin. We don't care. Do something that you're passionate about, and do it with your empathy for your customer. Because half the time, when we're sitting at home, we don't know who's our end customer and what he's using. So I think that customer centricity and empathy is extremely important. But coming back to the students, do something that you're passionate about. Be amongst the best at what you do, right? It doesn't matter. It could be in the world of art, science, scuba diving. It could be anything. Just, if it's a passion, be your very best and your true authentic self, right? And I think if you then go and attack large problems, whether you want to turn into an entrepreneur yourself, or you want to join friends who are entrepreneurs, or startups, or even large organizations. I mean, choices are so diverse. Or do stuff in the social sector. I've got so many friends who are creating such amazing impact that, it makes me feel very lowly about my existence when I think about what some of them are doing. And this is just pure social impact, right? But they're passionate about it. They're passionate about seeing those outcomes. So I think choose career streams that you feel are relevant. Choose career streams that are that you don't feel like you're going to work every day. I think that's the key thing that I would say. I'll pause there.
Yeah. No. Thank you, Amod, for. I would love it if people are not watching the chat. I think we should. I love that statement. Okay, for Amod's being a little shy, but Amod just said that "Ghas kaatne wala bano, par Achhi ghas to kaato. Like whatever you do, just do it passionately and do it to your best.
Yeah, it's a famous dialogue from this movie Lakshya. So
Yeah.
highly relevant.
In fact, just to interpolate what Omang said, Revan said, and again, during college time, I think it might be difficult to figure out what's your passion. So again, purely based on my experience, I think just do everything. It's a time, it's a phase of your life that that let's say you have a lot of energy, so that you can afford doing everything, right? And everything, like literally mean everything: your academics, your sports, arts, music, anything, any college related social campaign, college politics, everything. Just do everything, right? Because then only probably you will graduate, or you'll qualify to figure out that where you are enjoying. And then what Omang said, probably you'll be in a right situation and position to figure out that what's your passion. And again, college days, I know in the today's world, it's very difficult especially since last 2 years, I think everything, must have been virtual, but yes, I'm sure things will be back to normal. So just try to do everything. And obviously college is the best platform for this.
Yeah, I think this jam can only come from us who are missing our college days, honestly, because all of us reminisce about how much fun we had. Or at least I keep reminding my co-founder, who at least I still call Gisu, because he was just a ranker in undergrad, ranker in MBA, McKinsey. I mean, just all the time worried about that versus having fun. But fair.
So for example, again, grades, for that matter, one of the question is related to grade, that you may not have good grades, but I think it has to be compensated, it has to be offset to something else, right? And then you must be very good, you must be extraordinary on something else, right? I mean, maybe sports or arts or whatever. So, and obviously that remains pretty visible to anyone, and obviously, and people do appreciate that, what Umang mentioned already.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you shared that. I think there are a couple of questions coming in for you, Sairi, and I think this is something that I'm sure you've heard hundreds of times. Women in the workforce participation is low. I think COVID hasn't helped as such. You've been a inspiration for most, but not just workforce, because you started your career as an entrepreneur, right? So how do you inspire more women to take up entrepreneurship or join startups? And a related question, and I want you to sort of look at it, because there's another question around starting your career with a safe MNC versus an established startup. Right? So I think both of them could be looked at in a little similar form. So would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Right. So I think, let me take the second one first, safe MNC versus a startup. I think the world is too exciting right now to be safe. Like you can be safe when you are maybe 55, but don't be safe when you're 20. Like, go out, like have fun. You got to try different things when you're young. Let me give you an example. I got into my first startup by fluke, literally fluke. I was studying in JNU, and I got, and I used to do a lot of freelance work for, I speak Russian, so I used to do a lot of work for the Russian USSR embassies. And then one day somebody said, there's a guy who's building something and he's looking for somebody who speaks languages. And why didn't you go meet him? So I just show up, and here's this guy, very Richard Gere looking. He's an ex-mariner. He wants to set up this newspaper for mariners. And he's like, hey, I'm going to fund this whole thing. He's basically talking, grown-up language, and I am, 20. I'm not even understanding what he's saying, but he seemed really nice. And he's like, we're going to.
He looked like Richard Gere. So that helped.
And sounded very convincing. He said, I've worked all my life, but sailor depression is a big industry problem, and I'm looking to solve that, and I'm building a team which wants to be on it. So I had no idea where this is going to go, but meeting him, I put my hand up, and I was the first person on that team. And then I led that team from there till exit, learned how to build a product, learned how to hire engineers, build server rooms, the whole hog. I would have never gotten that had I not thrown myself into an opportunity that was right there. So don't do over analysis. If you don't like something, get out of it. It's right. Like, it's not a cage, right? And to me, I think that was the biggest learning curve I could ever get on. and we see that now playing out at Shiro's as well. People come in, we do two interesting things. One is we invite people to hang out before we hire them. We literally invite them to daily sync ups and stand-up meetings. So come listen what's happening. And if you want to pick up anything or you want to go hang out with one particular department, go do that. And second is, I think, just from the women's perspective, the opportunity that got lost with women in corporate, I think that we're making that up with women in entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship all across the spectrum, right? From super micro entrepreneurs, women who are home bakers selling on WhatsApp, to women who are building tech startups. I think now women are grabbing it with both hands. And there's only one lubricant of this ecosystem. I know everyone says mentorship and other things. Capital builds ecosystems. So we need to put more capital in hands of women at all levels. And that's going to change the game, because women will build organizations they want to work in, which means we're going to see more diversity in the kind of companies getting built, but also the kind of orgs that are being built. And I think, so just solve for capital, everything else will happen if you want to move this needle.
Thank you for that. I always wondered why the best capital allocators in the world don't have more capital to deploy in their hands, right? So if you think about it that way. So what very interesting piece that's also coming up is, I think we have discussed a little bit about new age roles and stuff. And now coming back to the culture point that you had about, right? Like, as organizations are evolving faster, as roles are changing, one of the single big aspects that all of us have to worry about is, how do we keep the culture in the right direction? How do we keep it constant? Even if it's evolving, at least how do we make sure that everyone's imbibing the right sort of culture? So in your view, Amod, you've built multiple large startups now. What's been your experience? Because one was obviously pure B2C e-commerce, and now this one's a more B2B e-commerce business. Very, very different kind of workforces, I'm sure, that you have as a broader org as such. And one of the big struggles is, different cultures. Like engineering team culture is always a little different from marketing, is a little different from offline. You have white collar, gray collar, blue collar workforces. Like, yours is the most complex org, if I can think of it, right? How have you navigated some of these things?
Yeah, I think you've put it very correctly. E-commerce is actually a very, very complex organization. So I feel that a lot of organizational theories end up getting tested in that pot of things. I think the first piece is to acknowledge that there are differences with different objectives, right? But the mission ends up being the same. And what each one of us is doing in order to contribute towards that mission, just keeping very, very deeply focused on that, making sure that there is empathy that we are developing between different kinds of teams. For example, operations teams tend to run with extremely like minute by minute sort of metrics, whereas a lot of technology teams tend to run with year-long, perspective, second order, third order effects of their decisions. Making sure that empathy is being built out by, over communicating why we are, working the way that we are working, soliciting inputs, having some degree of cross-pollination. For example, we continue to send our engineers out on the field with our operations people, our GTM folks, and actually making them go through that same pain, right? Once you see the pain, no better way to develop empathy than to expose people to the same pain, and vice versa. So, exposing so we've had people from a sales background shift into product management, right? So the idea is that, expose people to as much diverse context, and smart people will shine out. I think different panelists ended up hinting at this, right? You've got to look at these things as skills than a label that got stamped on you when you left college, right? So the more you think about it as skills, you realize that my learning didn't stop when I graduated, right? My learning is continuing, and organizations that allow smart people to navigate that complexity across different boundaries, essentially destroying those boundaries, allowing people to navigate between different sort of spaces and letting those smart people thrive. I think that's what those organizations will have an advantage. So a lot of our own cultural decisions have actually focused a lot more on that. Now, what I'm not getting into, I don't think we have sufficient time to talk about that is the effect of remote working on some of the cultural pieces and pros and cons of that. But I would just leave my thoughts here for now.
Sure. No, I'm on a lighter note. I'm here wondering, sitting, I'm unable to hire engineers, and here is Amod sending them on sales stints. I mean, clearly I'm doing something wrong. Okay, so lot of more questions coming in. Very, very excited crowd today. So this one's for you actually, Omang. And I think the questions is again a little bit around the newer skill sets, right? There are students who have a lot of different majors, and I think this is a common question that I think most of us would have entered, right? I don't know, in MBA and undergrad, that what is a major that we should take? How does it impact our roles in the future? I mean, I could answer it I did the most jugaad and took enough credits that I could take a finance strategy and marketing major in MBA so that I had 3 different series, jahan naukri milegi, wahan kaam ho jayega. And honestly, that was my journey. But I think considering Ashoka offers so many interesting courses, any sort of, and I think it has one of the best humanities liberal arts programs also in the country, right? But I wish more people took up that. In fact, I wish I had spent more time doing it, considering how much it helps you be a better leader, right? But any guidance to the students on making the best of what sort of new skills they should look at while they're in university?
Yeah, I think I've answered this to some level, but maybe I'll make it more contextual and personal. I was a good student in school, and in my days there was
unlike Amod, I think.
No, unlike Amod, and Amod was PhD. This was passed with high difficulty. Okay, but I remember there used to be a book written by, I don't know, Amod, if you remember this. There was a book which said after 10 plus 2 what? It was written by the only career counselor who had written something called Kumkum Tandon. So I happened to go and meet her and found her through the Daryaganj publisher. And I said, ma'am, I'm so confused. You've written so many colleges and so many streams. And we had a chat, and she said, why don't you apply for a liberal arts program at Harvard? And I did, and I got a scholarship, and I went to my father. My father's IIT, IIM, Harvard Business School. So he's like, what will you do reading poetry? Do you want to be a Renaissance man, right? Will you ever get a job after that? I'm just giving you that anecdote, 30 years ago or 20 years ago.
Clearly, you also disappointed your father.
I've totally disappointed my father. So the funny part was, now that I think of it, it would have been a very different world. Like, if you take the career choice that Sari made from where she started, I think just picking on her, the first thing that I would say is, and I'm not here to disregard MNCs, right? All of our companies are getting bigger, and we're beginning to have to bring in process and stuff, which we earlier never had to do. But it's so liberating. I'm just going to echo what she said, that don't waste your life working for someone in a cubbyhole. And that's what MNCs do. And by the way, from that yardstick, 20 years of my life is a failure, right? Because I did that for 15 years. I mean, I went through that experience. I'm just echoing that I wish I had the opportunity to start up and get out of college today, and really do something on my own. Because, if you ask a photographer or a filmmaker, he'll tell you if he's not creating, he'd rather be dead, right? And so you gotta create. You gotta feel passionate about creating. And I'm not saying everyone should be an entrepreneur, right? Everybody should start up on their own. Maybe you have a friend who's a great idea, or maybe you look at a startup. I mean, how does financial security today become the yardstick. At the end of the day, we're all wearing our t-shirts and normal jeans. We don't even know what brands we go in. We hire Ubers and Olas. Who drives a car anymore? So, the whole system has changed. The yardstick of success has changed. Success is not driven by financial motives only. It's about the impact we can create. So again, goes down to say, and another skill, I think someone used the word empathy. I would say emotional quotient today, right? The way we work is we find a problem. We naturally don't have enough resources at any point of time. And so we make these small pods, someone from content, someone from tech, someone from GTM, put a 6-man pod and say, go solve the problem. And then, you give them limited resources, you give them 100% empowerment, come and ask for forgiveness, not permission, and just go and solve it, right? Because every problem is a multi-dimensional problem, to the point that, it touches sales, it touches go-to-market, it touches different engineering, so on and so forth. So working in that small pod requires a lot of emotional quotient around how do you work as a team. The team wins when everyone wins, right? So I think as a student, it's about me, and you're fighting a race. But I think if you can develop skills in the area that you're passionate about, and you come out with the stuff to create, and I would say the only reason you should create is if you have a crazy idea that keeps you up at night and you think you have a unique solution, then go for it. I'm not saying go blindly and start up, right? And that's not the idea, because it does require capital and resources at the end of the day. But don't waste the opportunities that you have today. I regret my own career choices, even though I became a CEO at 27 when it was unheard of. But I would have taken a very different path had I been graduating today.
That's wonderful to hear. In fact, continuing on that, because you are pushing the creation narrative, we have a couple of questions. One attendee actually has lots of ideas, and his question to you, Shashank, is, can you help him turn his ideas into a startup? Like how does one really go about taking an idea and saying, okay, could this be a startup? And if yes, then what are the first 2-3 steps that I should do to make that happen? Any tips for our listeners on that?
Again, no fixed template, but again, I can share at least what I did. So back in 2011, right? I mean, when slowly, steadily, entrepreneurship word was more audible. Books written by Rashmi Bansal, were out on shelf. Flipkart was formed, right? And that was the time again. And by that time, I was 3 years old after college into consulting. So more or less the same stage, right? That, number of ideas, what to do. So at least what I did, that that put some effort, analytical effort to each and every idea. That means some bit of execution, or at least some bit of research, discussion with right stakeholders, so that you will be in the right situation or position for decision making. And when it boiled down to agriculture, then very soon I found myself somewhere in some village of Bihar. The good part was that, that again, yes, I was 24, 25 years old. So I was in a position to do this because there was no liability. I was youngest in the family. And again, similar to maybe Amod or Umang, had already disappointed my father, because
I think we should rename this panel to all the men. I think Saidi was right on this. All the men who were disappointed.
Because if you're good in study in Bihar, then you are meant for just one thing, and that is UPSC sooner or later. So right. I remember, right, when I cleared my IIT and when I went to my father in village that, hey, I cleared IIT. The next statement was, "Theek hai, abhi UPSC ki tayari karo." I was like, so again, so I was fortunate because when it boiled down to agriculture, very well, like within few months, I was somewhere in some village. And then with respect to time, the conviction kept building. And then again, it's been a long journey. So long story short, I think the simple answer is some time spent, some bit of execution, because then only probably you will get the again real depth of the water of the problem statement and the real measurement of your excitement towards the problem statement, I would say. But again, without quoting name, one very veteran entrepreneur, in fact, he tried to templatize the answer, is that ask yourself, and slightly philosophical too, that ask yourself that if you don't get funds, If you don't get co-founders, if you don't get team, there is no cash flow, but still, will you see yourself continuing working for next 5 years on this idea?
Yeah.
If the answer is yes, then that's the right idea.
Also,
And the flip side is that if the answer is yes, then it's not going to take 5 years.
I think what you said, one filter is, if you have an idea, go book a domain, and if you feel inspired enough to build on top of the domain, then it's something worth pursuing. Otherwise, you will have a collection of domains you've never built on.
Then maybe again we'll disappoint our fathers. So, so on that note, I think this has been one of the most wonderful panels I've been a part of. I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking to all of you. I'll hand over the session back to you, Urmi, and a pleasure to meet all of you. And thank you, Urmi, for having us today.
Thank you so much. This was a fantastic session. So much to learn from each one of you. It was full of humor, and yet we had such large nuggets of knowledge coming to us. Got to learn a lot on culture, on emotional intelligence, on skill building. And I think as a university, we are also headed in a right direction, in a similar direction, where actually I'm happy to tell you all that we spend 1.5 semester. Our students do not select the majors that they finally will graduate in. They just do the foundation courses, which are largely the skill building courses. So the idea here is that the basic DNA, the basic chassis of all Ashoka students, and the next up are the alumni, you will see them, is communication skills, critical thinking, and problem solving. So I think we are new age as a university. We are doing a lot of work in our departments of computer science, math, physics, and also our departments of pol science, economics, and philosophy. Thank you so much, Amod, Omang, Shashank, and Sairi. Right from the time I sent out my first email to now, deep gratitude to all of you to be a part of this. It's our honor and absolute delight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Urmi, and thanks, everyone. You have been such a wonderful moderator.
I love this. I mean, just on a sign-off note, this is why we started Math Matters, right? There is a deep pain that all men face, which just got validated today. So,
All right. Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Stay safe. Bye.
We now move on to the last segment of our evening. And I'm extremely proud to welcome 4 alums from 4 different cohorts who have excelled in their respective fields in the startup space. Together, they will discuss how a liberal arts and sciences education at Ashoka has helped them shape their careers in their respective organizations. I would like to welcome Dimpi Nandwani, psychology and entrepreneurship major, PG diploma from Ashoka University. She is now in the product team at Rapido. Richard Sen, Young India Fellow, product team at Inmobi. Mahesh Jakotia, Young India Fellow, co-founder at Bijak. And Mridul Agarwal, Young India Fellow, brand development at Swiggy. Welcome, alumni. It's our pleasure to have you. We're extremely proud of you because you are the torchbearers, the ambassadors of Ashoka University, and you carry Ashoka far and beyond. Mridul will be moderating the session. Over to you, Mridul.
Thank you, Urmi. I hope you guys have had a lovely session. It was very insightful to hear everybody. I hope we're able to share snippets about our journey and maybe tell about how Ashoka has really helped us and take it from there. So actually, this is one question that everybody asks me, and that's what I like to ask the panelists is, how has Ashoka really helped you get where you are? Mahesh, you're a very accomplished entrepreneur running one of India's leading ag tech firms. Dimpi and Richard, you're early in your career, but still working with India's sought after startups. So would like to hear from all of you all, how has the Ashoka experience led you to the successes in your life, professionally, personally? Would love to hear that. Maybe we'll begin with you, Mahesh.
Hey, thanks, Madhur. So glad to be a part of this panel. Hello, everyone. I'm founder of BJ. It's a B2B agri-tech startup that connects various stakeholders in the agriculture ecosystem. Coming to the Ashoka experience, so I was a part of just to lay out the context, I was a part of the first batch, and we were about 50 of us in that particular batch, right? So of course, Ashoka and the whole curriculum and everything, what the first thing that really helped was, give us certain tools that can help us take the right, take the right decisions, whether it's in the personal life or the professional life, uh, etc. Especially various courses from the philosophy or the group dynamics or leadership, right? Even when they are taught by the veterans in that particular space, whether let's say one of the India's best sociology professor is going to teach us sociology, or one of the stalwarts from best professors from whether the Pennsylvanias or the Stanfords or the ISBs, when each one teaches this curriculum in a more comprehensive way, it kind of helps us, gives us certain tools that we can able to leverage in the future. And second was, of course, the whole the ecosystem, right? The ecosystem and the cohort was very, very phenomenal, and they were like truth tellers, like honest truth tellers, helping us to, because everyone was looking to change themselves, and no one took feedback in the wrong way. And having that truth telling ecosystem near your cohort, which is trying to improve you on a day-to-day basis, definitely helped us in the long term. And of course, the third part was the whole inspirational personalities and the whole the ecosystem and the people who came on the platform, who came the YF, right? Whether it was not just the entrepreneurs, well-accomplished entrepreneurs, but even from a spiritual side, whether the founder of Speak Nikai or other people who, looking at their journeys, also inspired us. We were in a state of resonance throughout the phase of YF, helped us inspired and kept us motivated throughout the time. And yeah, I guess these are some of the factors that help us, build a lifelong tool for us.
That's fantastic, Mahesh. So that's actually, since you were from the first batch, I can totally imagine how the course would have changed, maybe from then till now. Maybe Dimpy and Richard can give us a better understanding of how the Ashoka curriculum would have changed over the years and how it has really helped you guys get into where you are today.
Yeah, good. That's fine.
Just a little bit of background. So I graduated last year itself in majoring in psychology and minoring in entrepreneurship. And soon after that, I started working in Rapido, which is now India's largest bike taxi startup. And I'm working there as an associate product manager. So I think when you hear these, the majors I'm coming from psychology, that is not a direct link to product management, given the industry standards. So most of the people in the product background comes from either a tech background or a business background. And that's why for me to make a switch very early in my career was quite difficult, entering in an industry which is full of people coming from tech or business industry. But I think one thing that really helped me is to have a core, is to have a strong hold on the core skills. And being a product manager is equivalent to being a strong problem solver. And these were the skill sets that have been taught during my time at Ashoka, the compulsory course that we were supposed to do, the critical thinking, the communication, the product solving skills. These are the core skills that made the transition to a new industry very much easier. And even the company could see the transition despite the background I was coming from. I think these are the daily life skills, the core skills that help you achieve where you are right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to what Dimpy said, right? I think we've spoken enough about like Ashoka, the curriculum itself, and how it's impacted our careers respectively. But I think like for me, what had the greatest impact for me probably was the peer network that we had, the overall exposure to like to people from different sort of fields that had come in. I come from an engineering background, right? And having now that I'm a product manager today, I'm going to throw a very casual jargon that's usually thrown around, right? About how product management is not just a science, it's also an art. So I think at the end of the day, for me as a PM, I think it's helped me a lot to just be able to be a better listener, to understand more perspectives, to not just have to not have tunnel vision, right? To just broaden your lens. And so, because at the end of the day, when you're trying to solve a problem, be it at a platform level or at a user level, at the end of the day, it's very important for you to understand multiple perspectives and look at multiple facets of the particular problem, right, that you're trying to solve. Then go back to your first principles and try to solve your problem. So I think that way, the exposure to my peers and the kind of understanding that you get from their backgrounds, I think that helped me a lot personally. So yeah, and this is again this on top of everything that academically Ashoka has to offer with our teachers and the courses that we have.
Yeah, and I can totally imagine that, especially because in the current times, there's so much of transition, there's so much of volatility. Maybe a course like Ashoka would have really prepared you for it, because when you're thrown at Ashoka, you're with 200 or maybe now even 250 people who you don't know from different walks of life. It kind of prepares you for a lot of flux. So just building onto that, right? Like at your jobs and Mahesh, at your venture, how is it that you have responded to this kind of a flux during the pandemic? There's a lot of volatility, a lot of change, a lot of complexity. And what, in your opinion, do you think this leads to? Where is this taking maybe the startup world or the tech industry to? Maybe Dimpy, Mahesh, Richard, you can just go ahead.
Yeah, so maybe I can start by answering the first part of the question. What has helped sustain or cope up in this environment of volatility and the virtual environment? So I think one of the things that personally has helped me is communication. Since we are all virtual, it's very important to have constant communication with your managers, with your peers, because sitting behind the screens, you're not sure what the other person is thinking about you, how the relations are going, how the work and professionally you are developing. So it's very important for you as an employee to keep having constant conversations with your managers and peers, and not just professional conversations. You have to replicate the offline model as well, to humanize the conversations that you are having, to also discuss the personal issues or the fun side of the lives you are living in. So just to give a small example, even in our organization, we started a weekly session called Think Out Loud for our team, in which we discuss topics which are beyond the company's or professional values. So we pick up topics, we have conversation about startups, entrepreneurship, Shark Tanks, the new series that are coming. So that entire feeling virtual world. So I just believe having constant communication and humanizing that communication can help you cope up with this changing world and virtual world.
Lovely.
Cool, I'll just go next. I think Dimpy's covered it pretty well from the cultural facet, right? Like, however, prior to InMobi, I was working at Make My Trip, right? And we were hit really hard when the pandemic hit, right? So in terms of addressing this sort of volatility, I think what helped us the most, and like what I learned, what I took away, what my biggest takeaway basically from that situation was basically when you are faced with an issue like that, right, of volatility, it's always important for you to like just go back and like acknowledge and understand the variables that have been affected. Could be anything. And then once you get to that spot, you then go back to your first principles, right, and understand exactly what the core issue is. It could be even from a communication perspective, from an org perspective, from a flow perspective, whatever it be. Go back to your first principles, and then I think moving on from there is what has really helped me throughout so far.
So yeah, I understand. So whenever things change externally, right, become very chaotic, you also try to adapt changes to kind of make bring advantage from that particular situation. But at times I also realized that having seen so many cycles, so many waves in the last 10 years, sometimes having that inner urge to control and not react to everything that's happening outside is also important at times. For example, when the farm laws came in, we knew there's going to be so much chaos. I mean, we could have done certain things which would have been in favor of that particular farm laws, but we also knew that you never know how the future would look like. Of course, we did certain things, but they were all reversible. So I think we need to have a very fine balance on having that inner strength to resist the urge, but also if there is definitely a good opportunity coming because of the external circumstances, take advantage of it. Yeah.
Oh, that's a very interesting perspective. It's about actually you're trying to take sometimes adversity and make the most of it.
Yeah.
So actually, I had one very important question, which actually will be very, very relevant to everybody who's signed in, and maybe even prospective folks who are graduating or wanting to look out for a job. And I would love to hear your opinion on that. Ashoka does not really give you a specialization, and you don't really are a specialist per se, but you are a generalist. And with that, what kind of job opportunities does it open up for you? Because, for example, in a cohort, you have folks from psychology, like Dimpy has done psychology, people from engineering, people from, I have somebody in a cohort who was a doctor. So what kind of opportunities do you see opening up, especially in the startup world now with, these kind of courses coming out? Where do you see this moving forward?
Okay, I'll take this one. So, see, for the ones passing out, right? Now the world has become much more educated. At least the companies and everything are appreciating and embracing people from other talents after seeing the success of whether how some of the entrepreneurs like the Great founder talks religiously about liberal arts and other things, right? So people now don't bifurcate with respect to whether you're from design background or psychology background or from a STEM kind of background. What matters is at very early stages the attitude, right? Even the most senior folks would be okay to oversee your hard skill sets. It's okay if you are not so good at it, but if your attitude is like, I'll give my 100%, I'll be very passionate, and I'm really looking very ambitious, and the hungriness is seen, then I think even the people are ready to give a chance. So for the graduating batch, I would just say, just focus on building these relationships, and don't worry if your attitude is good, then you can definitely forge relationship with some of the employers and get access to new opportunities. And of course, don't stress so much. I know this is your first job. Everyone wants to get the best out of it, but I would also say, do your best. But don't worry. You have seen the history has shown that the first job doesn't really play a very big pivotal role. As you need to be consistent. Like you can get in the good job in the first instant, but you need to be consistent throughout your life to outperform. So yeah.
Sure. I'll just have a follow-up question to that. So, you're an entrepreneur. I'm sure you do a lot of hirings. What are some of the roles that you see evolving now that weren't there before? That may be opening up some science. There are a lot of different kinds of new opportunities that come up. Is there any thoughts on that?
It's always. In terms of like even the hiring or the talent industry, right? Like how the tech used to be the one of the most important critical sectors a few years back, and even now also, I've seen even the talent acquisition or the whole HR has become very, very important and critical. Of course, not something new, but the way to kind of tap into or build an org structure. This is how other we build more for a remote working, trying to make the whole culture positivity and trying to engage. All those things have become very, very critical in a remote environment. And if the culture is nice and if everyone is in a very positive mood and everyone is motivated, then your organization can succeed, right? So we had been hiring a lot, placing a lot of emphasis on these aspects, ensuring that the mood of every employee is in a good way and other things, right? So I guess this would be for me critically at this point of time. This is one of the important aspects. Of course, beyond this, there are various roles coming up, but yeah.
Sure. Richard, any thoughts on this since you work with InMobi, which is the pioneer in tech?
I think one of the most important skills that at least we look at as well, right? Even if we're interviewing any new candidate as well, at the end of the day, is still it's the receptiveness more than anything. It's like this willingness to like learn and adapt, right? I think that's the most important thing, regardless of where you come from. For instance, I don't have a CS background, right? I'm a mechanical engineer. Not really a strong coder either, right? Like I might code a little bit, but I'm not really a strong coder. But at the end of the day, if you're receptive enough in given whatever field you are in, right, that really helps you. And I think that also instills a lot of confidence within an organization as well, right? And I'm sure I'm sure other entrepreneurs would concur with that. It gives a lot of comfort to organizations knowing that employees are willing to learn and are willing to basically they have the grit to push through. And if there's a problem to be solved, they will find a way to solve it, or at least give their best in whatever they're trying to solve.
Sure. Dimpi, what about you?
Yeah, I think just answering your specific part of what new fields do we see coming in, or what are the new career paths. So I think the trend has changed a lot. And before becoming a product manager, I was working as a community manager, and we were trying to build a community of customers who would help us with feedbacks or on-ground updates of how our app is performing, how our services are being on ground. So I think nowadays the role are changing immensely, and there are a lot of things that are evolving. So you don't need to fit in a particular category that were defined before. And in today's time, depending on your skill set, depending on your strong background you're coming from, or academic background you are coming from, you can create your own roles. So recently I met a person who was a chief meme officer at a fintech company, which is one of the India's largest fintech company. So it was inspiring to see how people are coming up with their own roles based on their own skill set. So you don't need to fit in one particular category. And nowadays the industry is evolving rapidly. Now there is a role of communities. The role of community is growing so much. There's entire products like Jupiter. They're building their entire product based on a community. Similarly, communities like Leap.club. So the power of community is increasing, and that's a role like community managers, growth hacker. These roles are increasing. And also, I feel the content creation field has emerged a lot. Earlier, content creation was just seen as a job of maybe actors or models, but nowadays most of the public are earning through content creation. So influencers, content creators, growth hackers, social media managers. These are the developing industries that I see, and I truly believe that you do not need to fit in one of the particular roles. You can just define your own role based on the background you're coming from.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I work at Swiggy. Recently, they removed, it actually offered a role of chief food taster at Swiggy. So there are different kinds of roles that come up, that are coming up in new age startups. Even I think a very new age role is chief of staff, which I think is a very new age kind of a role that's coming. So yeah, very interesting. And I think there's a lot of opportunities in terms of the new age kind of roles that come up, pretty much taking learning from the way Ashoka really kind of prepares you for all the eventualities. That's great. So the very important piece for all the students who've tuned in, they actually want your advice as to how would you ask them to prepare at different phases of their career. So maybe I'll give all of you all one question or one piece each, and would love to hear your thoughts. So Dimpi, since you've just recently graduated, and what advice would you give to people who are just about to graduate right now from Ashoka? So how they should prepare for their jobs ahead, and how do they really make sure that they land up where they want to? So what did you do, and maybe what advice would you give them?
Sure. So I think I was in the exact similar phase a year back, and I was confused about my friends were sitting for placement, some of them were getting them job offers. So I know it's a very confusing phase that you are in, and you're not sure what do you actually like. And even I was having questions like, I'm not sure what I really enjoy doing. I'm not sure which industry would I like. I do not know if I want to work in a corporate or a startup. But I think the simple answer to this is, unless you start working, you do not know where you enjoy. So take the opportunity that is coming to you. Unless you work in that environment, unless you work with that team, unless you work for that thing, you won't realize and you won't be able to answer if you are really enjoying it. And this gives you clarity yourself, what you're liking and what you're not liking. So in the first job, I would say there's you can just pick up the ball, you can experiment with, you can spend some time, and if you don't like, you have the option to quit and move to a further role. But unless you don't explore yourself, no one can help you answer this question of what you would want to do. And I think one of the things that helped me figure out what I really enjoy doing is doing a lot of internships during my college time, because that's a perfect time. You have a very small duration, you don't have any commitment, so you can hop on to different internships, different segments, different areas, and see what is actually making you happy. And this is a phase in which you can be as flexible as you can. You don't have any immediate requirements and needs to fulfill. So take this time to explore as much as you can and take on jobs. Do not restrict yourself if you're not getting that getting offered from a big company, just start somewhere, because unless you start, you won't know what you actually like doing, what you don't like doing. So yeah, and keep doing a lot of internships during the, because that gives you a clarity of which industry, which field, which vertical, which title would you enjoy, which kind of team, how big of a team would you enjoy working or not. So many questions. I think you don't understand them unless you start working. So yeah, just take on the ball and experiment with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very thoughtful advice. My first role out of Ashoka was actually taking orders in a restaurant. So that's where I started out. So I completely agree with Dimpy that, you should take up and just not waste time. I think just take up and do the job. So yeah, Richard, what would your advice be to folks who are maybe in their pre-final year or, in the second year of the graduation? How do they should prepare for the next 2-3 years, that they might be in the undergraduation, and how do they really utilize their time for the next couple of years? Because that's where a lot of your learnings get put into action, right? So what would be your thought for them?
I'm going to latch on to what a lot of what Dimpy's already said, because she's given a very extensive answer, right? But I think like your phase in college is a period of discovery, right, for you, both intellectually as well. During these phases, I think you need to explore as much as you can, as many fields as you can. Asking somebody a question, Kiri, what are you passionate about, is a very difficult question to answer, right? Because if you hadn't broadened your palette as yet, it's been difficult for you to say like, yeah, that's what I want to do. Especially it's a crucial decision, right? And like it's a crucial decision from the perspective of where you start, and it's never an issue for you to switch at any point of time. Like I know people who have worked in content all their life, gone on to work in product. I know people who work in product who've gone on to work in design, stuff like that, right? But my advice would be very similar to what Dimpy said as well. If anything piques your interest, right, network, try to understand, speak to people who are already in the field, try to understand the field a bit better. Understand the nuances of the role. If it still piques your interest, and the reason I'm saying this is because oftentimes a role would look very fancy from the outside, but you need to understand the nitty-gritties of it and how it works. Once you do your networking, if you see that it still piques your interest, you should probably use your network again, try to get some internships, get a flavor of what exactly it is. Once you have a better understanding of exactly what it is, right, then you can start pursue and work towards it if it's something that you want to explore. And that exploration phase doesn't stop right in your college, right, while you're in college or after you graduate. It continues throughout your working career as well. And a lot of companies, including in Mobi right now, for instance, have a lot of cross-pollinating roles as well. Even if I'm working as a PM right now, I could be working with the data science team, learning data science with them, right, at this stage, right? So I think, just keep exploring and use your network, try to understand the roles better, get to the core of the roles, right, and get an internship, get a flavor of it, and if it suits you, you should definitely go ahead. But yeah, be open to experimentation. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Yes, and Ashokan would truly believe that you should believe in experimentation. I think that's the DNA of Ashoka University. Mahesh, so coming to you, if you were to speak with somebody who's just finishing their 12th and they might be an engineer, or they might be wanting to get into a medicine, etc. So how do you really would suggest them to what advice would you have for them to make sure that everybody wants to be successful in the end, right? And since you have the most amount of experience amongst all of us here, how would you suggest to navigate all of these challenges that come across? Because when you're 18, 19, it's very difficult. So any thoughts on what would you were to say to them? Maybe you can look back upon your journey, so yeah.
No. If I have to look back, I have to really look way back. For my age, I think 12th was probably long back. But anyway, it's been more than 15, 16 years, I guess. So one thing is, of course, like what Dimpy or Richard have said, right? Like, don't follow your passion. Like there's this book by Carl Newport. It came out back in 2010. Sometimes when you're very, very young and you form opinions based on certain things you watch or certain things you say. See, you get passionate about certain things when you have enough autonomy to do those things, when you have enough expertise, a little bit of expertise to get in that resonance stage. and maybe rewards. If there are good enough rewards, you feel anything passionate. Like if these three things are there, a part of your thing, you get passionate about anything. So to gain those things, I think it's 12th is too early to actually determine whether you will have enough expertise, whether in the field of medicine or whether in the field of engineering, everything, right? I guess it's a very, very difficult time to actually come up with an answer. But I would, if I have to go back, maybe, one of the ways is to deep dive and read more autobiographies of certain professionals from various fields, how they have achieved, whether it's in the field of, let's say, someone in the field of medicine or someone in the field of astronaut, etc. I guess that could be one way. The other way is, of course, talking to someone who is already working in those fields, gaining day-to-day knowledge, etc. Third thing is, I would also say that given how in the current world things are very cross-border, cross-pollination. There's so much cross-pollination, right? It just doesn't mean that if you're in the medicine field, you can't go and do something in the electronics or entrepreneurship space. There have been enough examples, and it's very easy to navigate in other fields, right? Like my co-founder was a double-digit rank holder in IIT. He just studied for a year, but he dropped out after that. But he's currently handling the tech operations of the overall company, handling almost 150 engineers and designers. So I would say, of course, see basis enough biographies or enough, conversations you have with some of the senior folks. But in the end, don't really worry much about it. Later on, you can also shift gears in the future. So,
yeah. Thanks, Manish. That's really thoughtful. Actually, when I look back and because I was very confused about what I wanted to do at 12th, I'm an engineering dropout. I dropped out of engineering after first year, and then I went on to do it. I sometimes think that if back then Ashoka had an undergraduate program, that would have been perfect for me, because it allows you to navigate through so many courses of interest, which actually is not available in any of the major cities back then. Is again when I go back many years. So I totally agree with you that if we get the right kind of, try to reach out as much as possible and try to get as much as guidance, because it's too early to lose anything, because you're too young. You can always make up, is what I have also learned. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
Indeed. Yeah.
Great. So, yep, I think any closing thoughts, guys, in terms of how to go about the future of work and for startups, etc. Sure, Richard, please go ahead.
Actually, before that, I actually wanted to ask. So I think the three of us have shared our experience, right? Could you spend like 2 minutes sharing yours, though, like of how Ashoka has sort of impacted your journey so far? I think that'll be very interesting to hear.
Yeah, so actually Ashoka, so I'll tell you a bit about what I do. So I work at Swiggy. I build cloud kitchen brands for them. I'm a brand manager. I look after end-to-end brand creation. Prior to this, I used to work with India's leading hospitality chain brands like Copper Chimney, Bombay Brasserie, etc. So actually Ashoka has a very pivotal role to play. Though Ashoka teaches liberal arts, I came to Ashoka with a fresh mind to do something I'd never done before. And I started a bakery on campus. That's what I did. I used to bake cakes outside of classes, and I used to, try to get as much as feedback on my cooking and baking skills, etc. And that's when I realized how passionate I am about food and serving people. So for me, Ashoka played a very important part by providing the right agency or the right atmosphere, because everybody was so supportive. Mm-hmm. Imagine you're going to do an academic program and all people around you are like, go and do it. And it's not at all competitive, it was very collaborative. So I think for me, Ashoka provided that freedom. I think personally, it changed my life. And I'm not saying this because they're on the panel, but it really opened up my thought that I can do anything. Given this environment and the access it provided, I can do anything. And I chose to bake. And now 5 or 6 years later, after graduation, I'm very happy with what I'm doing. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Susan.
Great. Urmi, I think, is there any thoughts?
The thoughts are just this, that first of all, I'm really proud of all of you and representing the alum community and all the alums who are attending, like really so proud of you. Also, it feels great that someone from psychology background is now in product, and how the interdisciplinary education is actually translating into jobs. So I think we're, like I previously said, in the right direction in terms of education. And as the roles are emerging and as the organizations are emerging, everyone's seeing the value. The previous panel also spoke a lot about communication skills, critical thinking, and problem solving. And as you all are part of Ashoka, you know how invested we are in these three aspects. So yes, a little bit, if you could tell us what within your organizations do you see any hiring or any fellow colleagues who are also coming from this interdisciplinary bent of mind, and or do you see that in a silo where Ashoka exists? Yes, but do you see it overall and globally also in all your organizations? So quickly, if you can tell me that, that'll add a lot of value.
Sure. I'll go, Urmi. So I think at Swiggy, I was the first employee from Ashoka. But over the years, since it typically hires from business schools, it has opened up to getting folks from different backgrounds, especially because we deal with, like what Amod mentioned, that there are multiple teams and there is a very complicated structure. You require high levels of emotional intelligence to deal with a team. Like, how even Omang mentioned that, you have a pod which one content, one marketing, etc. So it requires you a lot of emotional intelligence to deal with different kinds of people, especially in a virtual world. So a organization like Swiggy actually is opening up a lot of these kind of roles, and especially in roles like a program manager where you have to deal with multiple teams, or even like in content where you have to work with different kinds of teams. They're definitely open up to hiring. And in fact, within my team itself, we have multiple Ashokans who are working. So I definitely see that it's difficult. I wouldn't say it's as easy, but things are changing. Organizations are becoming more open to hiring.
Sure. And it's
Yeah.
interesting to see how all four of you are from Ashoka, but you are with marketing and brand, and Dimpy and Richard from product. Also, I know a lot of Ashoka grads who are from, say, growth or program, etc. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to see how they are fitting into different kind of roles. So
Yeah.
Richard on InMobi.
Yeah, I think it's been a very short while for me at InMobi. I just recently joined InMobi, but prior to this, I was at Make My Trip, and I think at Make My Trip, I did end up meeting a couple of Ashokans there, which was very, very refreshing to see. Right, I think in a sea of individuals who come from like top tier business schools, it's good that you liberal arts is getting the kind of recognition it is getting, mainly because like what one Mridul had said about us requiring a lot of emotional intelligence, right, in dealing with multiple stakeholders. I've seen that, and I've seen how it's impacted me and how that has sort of impacted others as well. Of how much respect liberal arts has gained throughout. Prior to Make My Trip, I'm sure there was a company called Router Sports that I was working with as well, right out of Ashoka. I think I was the first person to join there within the product team, and I think they came back to hire as well, because they saw a lot of value in liberal arts as a whole, right? So I think that was really great to see. So yeah, I think the industry is slowly warming up, but it's definitely like a very good progressive curve that we're seeing now.
Right. What are your thoughts, Mahesh?
So, for example, just to give an example, one of the design heads at BJP, right? He basically did his undergrad from fashion design, but overall he grew his career in such a way that currently he manages overall design, the overall UI UX and of the whole BJP platform. And one of the major qualities maybe was that he spent weeks and months at the various villages of India trying to understand the customer psyche. For example, if he has designed certain app has been designed, looking at the facial expressions of the customer when he's getting shocked, when he's getting awed, and accordingly tweaking the product interfaces, right? You can't directly go and ask do Q&As by the customers because you can never get the right answer. Sometimes you need to rely on this other aspects, the empathy, the emotional intelligence, and all that stuff. So someone who's empathetic and can actually feel the customer, or it could be anything, whether the customers or whether your potential new joinees or various stakeholders you meet on a day-to-day basis, trying to gauge or building a polygraph of their of reading various people is a tremendous thing to have, tool to have. So I guess, yes, we believe in multidisciplinary thing. And also what I've seen is recently there have been a lot of interest in agri-tech. Like I've seen people from Cred or the PhonePays have joining our company. And one of the reasons was they wanted to deep dive and get more and more gain more knowledge in the agri space. Other fintech and other things have been grown in a larger way, but maybe agri is going to be the next maybe the next wave would come from the agri. So yeah, yes. So there is definitely a lot of multidisciplinary talent in the company.
And I'm sure, Dimpy, that's the case in Rapido also. I see a lot of Rapido advertisements these days. Each time I think about you. Do you see a little shift in hiring? Do you see liberal arts getting more traction in terms of new journeys?
Yeah, I think this point was also touched in the previous panel. Like, if you have the strong core skill set like problem solving, critical thinking, and communication, then companies do hire you. They do not specifically look at the background or the degrees you are coming up with, and that was the case in my in my profile also. So I do have been seeing a shift in the industry. Like, people are focusing on the core skills rather than the degrees. But it's a very slow change right now, and just I think about in few years, this will make its mark. The transition is happening, but it's in a very slow stage. But if you build your core skills, if you build fundamentally, if you have strong foundations, you would be able to crack any job that you are at here. And companies are becoming more acceptable to these new job profiles, to these candidates who are coming from different backgrounds. Yeah, but you would have to prove themselves. You need to be great at communication. You need to sell yourself by your strong storytelling skills. Yeah.
Sure. So right from the beginning of this event, what we are getting to hear is that, of course, you need to have your major skill sets in the specialized area that you are graduating in. We can't forget about that. And alongside the core skills, the other skill sets, the emotional intelligence and the problem solving skills are becoming also equally important, if not more, right? As we put a closure to the event, one last thought, if all of you could just tell me, since we do have a lot of youngsters, students who are attending this, startups are going to give a lot of jobs. A whole large chunk of jobs are coming from the startup ecosystem. As a youngster, as a young student, as a fresher who's graduating, who probably is in his early 20s, what is that one right skill or attitude that a student needs to hone himself to enter the startup system with a bang? Dimpy, you can go first. Sorry, okay, Richard.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the two core skills that I would probably advise is probably, one is just be receptive, right? I think this is something that's resonated throughout the entire discussion, since 3, I think. Just be receptive, and secondly is just keep. And Ashoka really does this really well, where it sort of embeds this habit of critical thinking. And I think if you have these two skills with you, where you're receptive and you're able to think critically, these two combined allows you to do whatever you want, right? Because then once you enter an organization, irrespective of the role, you become role agnostic almost, because then you can pick up any role fairly quickly if you're as receptive and you're able to think a bit more with a bit more depth, right? I think that helps a lot. So I think as long as you keep these two skill sets in mind, the fear of am I choosing the right career path? I think that sort of disappears immediately.
Right. Dimpy, would you agree?
Yeah. Similarly, building onto this, so critical thinking is, of course, one of the most fundamental skills that one needs to have nowadays. Apart from that, I truly believe that communication and storytelling has also become a very core skill right now, right from your interviews to the investors you are pitching it, to the team or product idea you are pitching to your team. In all of these aspects, communication plays a key role. And the better you are at communication, the better you are at the storytelling, the better you are able to convince yourself, the more you are able to win. So, and these skill sets take time to build up. And Ashoka, I think, gives you 3 or 4 years with constant exposure to building up on your communication. So I truly believe that apart from critical thinking, problem solving, communication and being good at storytelling is also key skills right now. It helps you in all your phases of your job, right from interviews to investors, pitching it to investors or your team. Yeah.
So what you're adding onto Richard's skills are communication skills.
Yeah.
Largely, right. Mridul?
So,
Especially in marketing. Now you're the unique one here who's from marketing. So in marketing space, what if that is my niche, then what is the skill set and what's the right attitude? So more than the skill, I was also referring to what is the right attitude which makes you thrive in a startup.
So I think people from our culture get actually very, or our age, early 20s, they are very hell-bent on getting the best cream de la cream job, very high paying, etc. In fact, one attitude that I had was, I want to get into the company. I will grow my way up. It doesn't matter if I'm being paid X amount. In 3 years' time, if I'm good, they will promote me. I'll find my way out. I think that is the attitude what young people need to have. So marketing, there is a executive who's going to be writing names and descriptions for us, and there's going to be somebody who's going to be making brand decks, etc. So that journey from there is just get in the company, give your best, try to learn as much as you can. There's no doubt that in a certain point in time you will be at that creme de la creme position, but just take what you, don't be too picky early on in your career. Just go and get it. Very easy to change and grow in the company, try different roles, because startups are not that well defined typically. You get to do a lot of roles. So just take what you get. If I would have got Swiggy right out of college, I would have taken whatever I got. So I think that's very important to attitude. Other skill sets you learn on the job. They're very open. They don't really pin hard on you that you don't know technical skills. You can learn that on the job.
Sure. Mahesh, last thoughts.
Yeah. So see, some of the best employees I've worked with had this particular growth mindset, right? They were malleable enough, and there's so much content out there in the world that even if you want to learn certain new things, whether let's say if you're entering B2B payments or trying to learn a little bit of analytics, etc., it's within a few weeks they were able to imbibe that particular knowledge base. And startups are very, very, like how Mridul said, right? They are very, very fluid. All the teams, there's so much like some team member is working in certain team and then he's shifting to another team, right? It all depends on how much confidence do the stakeholders have to give you the work. It's like a football. If they are confident that you can pass the ball, then they'll be ready to give you more work or provide you more opportunities to grow and get experience about other things. So have that mindset of doing everything with being extremely passionate about what you're doing and be very curious. I guess that will make you succeed in your startup.
Thank you. Extremely insightful, and I'm sure it helped the student community and recruiters and all of us equally. Thank you so much for your time, all of you. 2.5 hours of wonderful discussions and insights. I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank our guests, Deep Kalra, Professor Debayan Gupta, Amod Malviya, Omang Bedi, Shashank Kumar, Sairi Chahal, and our alums, Dimpy Nanwani, Mahesh Japotia, Richard Sen, and Mridul Agarwal. Many thanks to our audience for all the support and questions that kept coming in. Special mention to all the team members at the Career Development Office. Without your support, this event would not have been possible. Thank you and good night.
Thank you so much, Omang.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone.